Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaskar. You have stepped into a course that is going to change the way that you look at data. Not just how you analyze it, but also how you communicate it. My name is Nivid Desai. I serve as the Program Executive at Writing Studio IIT Gandhinagar. Welcome to Writing for Data Science. This course is at the intersection of analysis and communication. As all of us know, data analysis is not just about coding and models. It is about solving real-world problems. And that is exactly why every single thought that goes into solving those problems needs to be communicated. And not just to one audience, across multiple stakeholders. That is where this course comes in. This course prepares you with the foundations of writing, especially curated for data science. We will discuss audience analysis, critical thinking, logical reasoning, as well as storytelling that is native to data science. So join me on a journey at the intersection of numbers and narratives. I'll see you in class. Namaskar, hello and welcome to Writing for Data Science. My name is Nivid Desai and we are on a journey of exploring the interesting intersections of numbers and narratives. In the last class, we saw the strategies and approaches of dealing with technical and non-technical audiences. When we need to cater our communication for specific audience purposes and their levels of knowledge and preferences in terms of information, we need to augment our communication to suit their preferences. And we saw what were the different strategies and approaches that we could practice in order to accommodate technical and non-technical audiences. If you remember, we ended that lecture with looking at two structures, one for technical audience and one for non-technical audience. Both of them were aligned with the intuitive thinking patterns of the technical as well as non-technical audiences. For today's lecture, we will look at the technical audience structure, and the next one, we will deal with the non-technical audience structure. For the purposes of both these lectures, I have taken reports as a demo document. So we will look at how to structure reports for technical audiences. Because in this case, the structure of a report should reflect the audience needs, not only in terms of what information they need, but also how do they need it? How do they think about a problem? How do they go about locating any information throughout a document? So in this case, we are looking at how to structure a report for technical audiences. So at the beginning, let us see the components that are contained within a report for technical audiences. Again, I must emphasize this as strongly as I can. This is not a format. This is not a rule. This is a structure that can help us understand how to categorize ideas and how to look at one monolith of idea and break it apart into separate things that can intuitively make sense to a technical audience. Let's look at the components. First, we have an abstract, then an introduction, then methodology, then results, discussion, and conclusion. Let's dive into each one of these in some detail. What is an abstract? An abstract is a concise summary of the study's objectives, methods, findings, and conclusions. I like to call this the trailer of a film. This is the one-glance content of giving the complete picture of what the paper or what the report contains. So, an abstract, upon reading it in one go, will give the reader an idea of what to expect throughout the longer document. Then, after the abstract, we move on to introduction. An introduction provides background, research questions, and significance. What was the background of this problem that you have set out to explore? What research questions are you exploring? And why does it matter? What is the significance of the problem that you are trying to solve? This is as far as the what is concerned. The next question to ask is how. That's where the methodology comes into play. Methodology details data sources, analysis techniques, and model selection. If you remember, we talked about the difference between method and methodology in the past couple of lectures. Method describes what tools, what data, what analysis have you done, and the model selection, which falls within methodology, answers why. Why is it that this technique, why is it that this particular method fits within your particular problem? So, it is not only about describing the methods, but also justifying the methods. That's where the gap between method and methodology is completely filled. So, I would like you to pay close attention to it, whether you are not only focusing on methods, but also bringing in methodology when you are writing the report. After methodology, once you have answered the how, you come back to results. What is it that you found? It presents key findings with appropriate tables and graphs. Particularly within data science, if you are dealing with any kind of data, you cannot rely solely on either pure numbers, raw data, and textual evidence. You have to resort to some sort of visualization to cater the insights and findings to the audience. After results, we arrive at discussion, which interprets the results. It considers the implications of the results, and it highlights the limitations. We'll talk about this in detail later, but I would like you to pay close attention to this section, discussion, because this is where a researcher, a data scientist, communicator becomes a critical thinker, because they have to start interpreting the results, they have to consider implications, and also highlight the limitations of your study. How do we approach this? We have a dedicated module of critical thinking and logical reasoning later on, so we will arrive at that and explore this entire area in detail. But for today's lecture, we have a dedicated section to discuss discussion. So, we will look at how the data science communicator becomes a critical thinker with this section of discussion. And of course, then you conclude. In the conclusion, you summarize the key takeaways and you suggest future research directions, because the point is not just to sum everything up and tie it in a neat ribbon. The point is to develop an entire perspective for the reader to explore further areas in future. That's the point of a critical communicator when it comes to a technical audience. Now, I would like you to reflect for a moment on this question. Why do technical reports follow a strict structure? How does this help data scientists communicate their findings effectively? Spend a couple of moments, think about this, take some notes, because I would like you to compare your initial ideas with your full-fledged understanding by the end of the lecture, because then you would be able to compare how much you have learnt within the scope of our conversation today. Take some notes, think about them. I'll see you again. Now we will take each of these components and explore them independently in some detail. We'll look at their components, we'll look at the purpose that they serve, and some examples. Of course, reflections and exercises also follow. So let's begin at the very beginning. The abstract. An abstract serves the purpose of condensing the entire study. The abstract is a standalone summary of the entire report, typically of 150 to 250 words. Yes, it is that short. It is a concise, extremely concentrated bunch of information in which the reader gets a full idea of the scope of the study, its methodology, its findings, and the kind of importance that it carries. So, it is a crafty little piece of information that is placed at the top of your report. So, if someone does not want to read the entire report, they can still get a glimpse of what the report is trying to communicate and convey. That is why I have used the word standalone, because it can be detached from your report and it will still serve as a full source of information. As an abstract, it must include the problem statement, the methods that you have used, the key findings, and the conclusions and implications. All of these are components that make up an abstract, once again I must emphasize, within 150 to 250 words. This is not a strict formal boundary, but typically abstracts are written within this range. That is why I have used this word count as the illustrator to signify just how long an abstract should be. I myself have sometimes written abstracts ranging up to 500 words, but that is not the norm. That is an exception, in which case some conferences and some platforms may be looking for longer abstracts to get into the depth of your research. That is not the norm. Typically, across multiple technical disciplines, what we have noticed is that abstracts range from 150 to 250 words. However, here's the crafty part. It is written last, but it appears first. What do I mean by this? It is written last because you have to conduct the research first. You have to select a methodology, you have to report the key findings, and you have to conclude with the implications before you condense all of this information and put it up at the top. So, logically, it makes complete sense to not begin writing the abstract at the very beginning. You cannot condense the information if the information isn't there. So, a smart thing to do is to write your entire report first, to check every single piece of information that you have to include, and then condense all of that to include within the abstract. That is why it is written at the very end, to ensure that it covers the entire scope of information, and then it appears first. It appears as the first element that your reader interacts with as soon as they open your report. So, an abstract is written last, but it appears first. This is an example. The study analyzes customer churn prediction using logistic regression and random forests on a data set of 50,000 transactions. The logistic regression model achieves 85% accuracy, while the random forest outperformed it at 92%. These results suggest that ensemble learning methods are better suited for churn prediction in subscription-based businesses. I will freeze frame here, take some moments, read through this entire thing, and I'll see you again after a while. I hope you read through this a couple of times and you noticed some very interesting craftsmanship in writing this small bunch of information. Notice this, let's pull this apart sentence by sentence. The study analyzes customer churn prediction using logistic regression and random forests on a data set of 50,000 transactions. Take some time and locate the different pieces of information that reside within this one sentence. It has the problem statement. Churn. Number one, it has the problem statement that it analyzes customer churn prediction. Number two, it has the methodology, logistic regression and random forests. And it also has the size of the data set, a data set of 50,000 transactions. Now, it also includes the results. The logistic regression model achieved 85% accuracy, while the random forest outperformed it at 92%. This is the result. And then the implication and the conclusion. These results suggest that ensemble learning methods are better suited for churn prediction in subscription based businesses. Within 4 to 5 sentences at max, it is covering the entire scope of the research. You can almost imagine what the report may look like just by reading this brief abstract. That is the craftsmanship of actually including everything that the report is offering within a small bunch of words. I understand that when I told you that an abstract is 150 to 250 words, it may have seemed scary at first. How do we condense this much information in this short little duration? But I hope that it is now a little clearer of how an abstract can actually crunch information and offer a concise view of the entire technical report. Next up, we have introduction. Introduction establishes context. It provides background information and defines the study's scope. It should explain the problem being addressed. It should provide a literature review in case if it is applicable. This is not necessarily compulsory within the scope of a technical report. And it should definitely define research objectives and the research questions. Here's an example for you. Predicting customer churn is critical for businesses that rely on long-term subscriptions. While traditional statistical models have been used for churn analysis, recent advances in machine learning offer better predictive power. This study compares logistic regression and random forests to determine the most effective model for customer retention strategies. Once again, I'm keeping this on your screen for a couple of moments. Read this twice and thrice to locate the pieces of information that reside within this small paragraph. Mind you, this paragraph is part of an introduction, but I would like you to notice just how many components and elements does it house within itself. Take a moment, read through it twice or thrice. I'll see you again. The next part of a technical report is methodology. Methodology ensures reproducibility. I have spoken about this word briefly in the previous lecture, so I'll add some bit more context to it. What do we mean by reproducibility? Let's see. The methodology section provides step-by-step details of how the study was conducted. It includes dataset description, the source, the size, the cleaning methods. It includes model selection, the algorithms used, and the rationale for choice. And it includes evaluation metrics, as in accuracy, reproducibility, etc. So take a moment and think critically. If a section contains all of these details, what is its job? The job of methodology is to ensure reproducibility. We talked about this in the previous lecture as well. Let me expand upon that thought. The point of any robust technical report, any robust scientific report, is that it should not be something that exists only within one particular context and proves something only once. The job of science is to be consistent. The job of a technical analysis is to be consistent independent of its context. So, every single element that you have used to arrive at your analysis has to be detailed in terms of its description, including the data set, including the source, size, and cleaning methods. Then, the model selection and the rationale for choice. Remember the distinction between method and methodology. The algorithms used denote the method, while the rationale for choice denotes methodology because it addresses why. It addresses the reason for choosing that particular algorithm or model. And then the evaluation metrics. how did you determine the accuracy of this analysis? And how will you ensure the reproducibility of its analysis? Because anyone can independently test the kind of analysis that you have done, and ideally, they should come up with the same results. This is the essence of well written technical documentation, because it should not only work within one particular scenario, one particular context, but on the other hand, it should be written in such a detailed manner that if somebody wants to reproduce the exact same result, they have the recipe within the methodology section of how to arrive at this level of reproducibility. Let's look at an example. This is an example that explains model selection. We selected a logistic regression model due to its interpretability and a random forest model for its ability to capture non-linear relationships. Hyperparameter tuning was performed using grid search. If you see, it breaks apart different components, including rationality and the kind of process that was done on the data as well. This ensures that if somebody else wants to choose the same models for the same reason, they have a robust backing thanks to your literature, thanks to your writing, and thanks to its clarity. They can know why they are choosing what they are choosing. And in case if they want to test its accuracy, they also know what to rely on. That is the essence of a well-written methodology part. After the how, we arrive at results. The methodology gives rise to some sort of exploration and observation of what happens when that method is applied on the data set that you have selected. That's where the results section comes in, because results presents findings. The results section presents key findings with appropriate tables and graphs. Like I said earlier, you don't necessarily have to rely on pure numbers and textual evidence. In order to present this data findings as compellingly as possible, you can use graphics and visualization to make it as interactive and as accessible as possible. It should use clear, well-labeled visualizations, report statistical significance when applicable, and this section should avoid interpretation completely. It should only stick to presenting raw facts. There is a separate section called discussion for interpretation. We will arrive at that later. But within the results section, please ensure, please double check every time you're writing a results section that it should not have any bit of interpretation. Because at this stage, the results need to be as objective as possible. The logic is that if somebody replicates your study, if somebody replicates your entire methodology, your results section should report exactly what you have found so that they can compare their results with your results and see the robustness of your analysis. Therefore, no interpretation in the results section. I must underline this as boldly as I can. No interpretation, no subjectivity within the results section. You'll get your time, you'll get your space to think about your own implications, but that's for later. Here's an example. Figure 2 shows that the random forest model achieved an F1 score of 0.92, significantly outperforming logistic regression, which has an F1 score of 0.85 and a p-value less than 0.01. This is as objective as it can be. This is as numbers driven, as technical as it can be. If you notice, there is no interpretation. It is only pure reportage of what was observed. People view the results and they describe the results. That is it. That is the duty of a results section. Reflect on this question for a minute, will you? What is the risk of including interpretation in the results section? I gave you a hint when I was talking about it in the previous slide, but I would like you to think about this independently. What is the risk of including any kind of subjective interpretation within the results section. Think about it for a moment, take some notes, and I will get back to you. I understand that research is not truly research in case if there is no interpretation, if there are no implications. And that is where our next section comes into being, discussion. Discussion interprets the results that we have reported in the previous section. It discusses the implications and it highlights the limitations. In this case, I must make it abundantly clear that highlighting the limitations is as important a part of noting down your entire thought process as the successes of your model. So in case if there is any limitation in the kind of data that you have selected, in the models that you have used, and in the results that you have found, please be honest in reporting that within the discussion section. So within the analysis, if you have faced any flaws, if you have faced any pitfalls, please communicate that clearly so that if somebody wants to replicate your study, if somebody wants to implement your study, they should be absolutely clear about what to expect, not only in terms of the positive successes, but also the limitations of your data, the limitations of your analysis and findings. This is why it is extremely crucial to be clear and honest in communicating to a technical audience so that you cannot fudge your data, you cannot mess up your data and select a preferable view of how the analysis was conducted. You don't have to skew your entire process to meet a preferable end. The point is to highlight the limitations to ensure that whenever somebody implements your model, they should know exactly what to expect. Here's an example. The results indicate that the ensemble learning methods are more effective for customer churn prediction. However, model interpretability remains a challenge as random forests do not provide straightforward coefficient based insights like logistical regression. If you notice, this last line is as clear a statement of limitation as there can be. This does not merit to a discredit of your research. Noting down your limitations is not failure. Noting down limitations is not weakness. Let us get that absolutely clear. Noting down limitations is the ethically right thing to do. It is the best practice because it will ensure that your research scope is clearly defined, and in case if there is something that your research has not been able to successfully do, future scientists will take it up by themselves. So by highlighting the limitations, you are not only becoming absolutely clear about your research scope, tacitly you are also opening doors to new research. That's the job of a well-written discussion section. Now let's come to the last part, the conclusion. Conclusion summarizes key takeaways. It should briefly restate what was studied, what were the key findings, and any implications for practice. This restate is a very important word because a conclusion is not just a one-line summary of everything that happened. It's a restatement. You began with a background, you began with a context of introduction, and in this part, you have to restate all of this with the retrospect of having done all the research. So, all the key findings that were derived as a part of the research and any implications that may need to be considered when this analysis is put to practice has to be included within the conclusion section. I'll show you an example, maybe that can clear things up. Look at this example. This study demonstrates that random forests outperform logistic regression in customer churn prediction. Future work should explore deep learning approaches for further improvements. Just 2 sentences, but absolutely clear about what the problem statement was, what the results were, and what the future scope of the entire research can be. Here's a question to reflect on. How does a strong conclusion differ from an abstract? An abstract also more or less has the same things that the conclusion does. But I would like you to think, we have discussed both conclusion and abstract in detail. We've also seen examples. So think about this for a moment. How would a conclusion section differ from the purpose, the components, and the contents of an abstract? Think about it, make some differential notes, and I'll get back to you. In the end, to conclude this lecture, I have 2 exercises for you, not just one. So in these 2 exercises, one by one, I will give you a problem statement to work with, and I would like you to work with me so that we can build a functional understanding of communicating with a technical audience. In the first exercise, you can select a research paper or technical report from your field. We have tried to discuss as many fields of data as possible. You may be a professional, you may be a student across different disciplines, and each discipline deals with data in some way or another. So if you are dealing with data, please pick up a research paper or a technical report from your field. Then notice the structure of the document. If it is catered towards a technical audience, it may follow some kind of a structure that we have discussed today. Because this structure is not only limited to technical reports, this is also the structure in which research papers are written. If you remember, we discussed about the IMRAD format in the last lecture: introduction, methodology, results, and discussion. This format is universal, usually, as far as academic writing is concerned. So, this is not just limited to technical writing. I would also like you to notice this within research papers. And here's the task for you. Compare it with the structure that we learned today and note your observations. Which section caters to what kind of detail? Does it match with the kind of conversation that you and I had today? Notice your observations, will you? I'll get back to you with the second exercise. Here's your second exercise to end today's lecture. You may have looked at some research paper or technical report from your domain, so now it's time to put all of this in practice. Structure your thoughts to suit a technical audience's needs. We began with saying that these structures are catering to each technical audience's specific needs, not only in terms of the information that they need, but also the rhythm at which they think. Our job is to augment our communication to suit the kind of preferences that they have in catering to the information. So, structure your thoughts to suit a technical audience's needs. Pick up any topic from your field and categorize your knowledge in the structure that we studied. Imagine your knowledge, the entire monolith of knowledge that you have right now, imagine it in the form of a report, in the form of a paper, and try to segment different pieces of your knowledge into different sections. Can you imagine what would be a part of introduction, what would be a part of methodology, what would be a part of results, discussion, and conclusion? It'll be interesting to visualize a paper and try and segment your existing knowledge into these different parts so that you can understand when you need to communicate to a technical audience, how do you segment your information to suit their curiosities and their preferences. So that was it from my end as far as structuring a report for a technical audience is concerned. In the next lecture, we will shift the audience to a non-technical one. We will look at how to structure our thoughts to cater to a non-technical audience's needs and curiosities. Until then, I would strongly recommend that you keep practicing the kind of structures that we have studied, not just practice writing in them, but also gradually begin thinking in them so that you can look at your own critical thinking from a more structured, more methodical point of view. In the next one, we will look at how do we structure the same thoughts, the same kind of insights for a non-technical audience. And we will try to augment our communication for their preferred styles. Until then, stay curious, keep learning. I will see you in the next class. Thank you so much for being with me today. Namaskar.